Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be video number 5 from the typological analysis series. And in today's video, we're going to derive and introduce Jungian cognitive functions. In the first part of the video, we'll talk a bit about Carl Jung himself and try to understand how he came up with the cognitive functions because he was the founder of this theory. And in the later part, we're going to go through this diagram and populate the information here, which is how we derive the functions themselves. Okay, so for the first part of the video, Carl Jung, he was a Swiss psychoanalyst, and he was working also as a psychiatrist as well. And he was working with people for 40, 50 years, I think even more. So he was born in the late 1800s and he died around middle 1900s. So he had over 40 years of experience with working with other people. And of course, he's famous for his work in psychology. He found analytical psychology. And also he was working with Freud before. And they actually got different opinions at some point and they stopped working together. So he focused on his own research after that. And what we're going to focusing on today, though, is his work, which was published in 1921, which is called Psychological Types. And this is the work in which he introduces the cognitive functions that we're going to talk about today. Now, how is this related to MBTI? So MBTI is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which of course is the basis of the 16 personalities website, which is very famous. They claim that over like 500 million people have done the test there. And why I'm saying that this is the heart of MBTI is because MBTI was created by Myers-Briggs and they were actually basing the theory of the 16 personalities on the Jungian cognitive functions and on the work of Carl Jung. But what they did is that they made it more accessible to the public, so they made it more commercial, which lost some sharpness of the theory. And what we want to do here is regain this sharpness, regain this detail, because Jungian cognitive functions are a lot more appropriate to explain human behavior than just the 16 personalities. Yeah, the 16 personalities that you see there on the side, it's not that bad, but it loses a lot of detail. And we want to dive deeper and understand the actual theory behind that. So this is the purpose of this whole channel actually. Okay, so there is a bit of a theory, and now about the cognitive functions themselves. So what Carl Jung did, so now we focus on this graph here, is during his work, he was working with a lot of people, and at some point he discovered or noticed that most people actually have very similar preferences to one another. And he tried to describe this in his psychological types work book. And what he did was he started from the top, which in the top here we have the experience of a person. So what he did is he was looking at the experience of people and tried to analyze what is experience and how different people have different experiences and how some people have the same or similar experiences. And at the first stage, what he notices is that this experience, it can be divided into two main processes. So this is his first observation. And the two main processes are called perception and judgment. And for perception, we use P as annotation. And for judgment, we use J. So this is the next layer to this graph. And so what is perception and judgment? So perception is a process in which you perceive, or in other words, gather information or sequence information. So this is the main purpose of the perception process. And how you do that, you have different faculties to do that, but there are two main ones, which we'll look at in the next layer of this graph. But the two main ones are actually sensing and intuition. And you can think about perception as if you're using the sensing, let's say, you're gathering information from the outside world using your senses. And the intuition is more on the abstract side. So you're again gathering information or sequencing information, but it's using your, it's trying to find underlying meaning or connections between things. So this is the intuition part. And now for the judgment, which is about, so what is judgment? The judgment process is about decision making. So you can think about, you already have some information there, and then you apply some criteria to make a decision. So this is the judgment process. And the judgment process can be thought of as a dichotomy between, let's say, true or false, or good or bad, or like or dislike, this kind of dichotomies, but it's a decision making process. So let's say a statement like, I like something, or this is true. So this is a judgment type of statement, since it applies judgment to the information you already have. So this is the judgment axis. So perception and judgment are the two main ones. There's one more thing that Carl Jung calls the perception process irrational and the judgment process rational. I personally don't find any use in using those terms, so I don't find any benefit, so I won't be using that, but this is for information. If you're interested, you can read more how Carl Jung describes this. Now, after that, on the next layer, so for perception, we already talk about it, but the perception is split into two parts. So the first part we can call sensing, which is annotated with S, and the next part is intuition, for which we use N. So why do we use N instead of I? Because intuition starts with I. Well, we'll find out a bit later. And so again, let's quickly describe these processes. So the perception process is about gathering and sequencing information, and you can do that by using the sensing process, which is part of the perception, and the sensing process using your 5 senses. So you observe either the things around you or subjectively inside you, and you gather information like that. So, and the intuition is more about understanding underlying meaning and connections between things, or creating new ideas, brainstorming, things like that. So if you want to understand better what's the differences, let's say that you are currently looking at someone on the street, or maybe a couple, they're talking. And what a person who is using the sensing process is going to see is that they're going to see concrete data, concrete details. For example, they're going to see, okay, this guy is wearing a brown jacket and black shoes, and he's talking in a loud voice. So they're going to notice the concrete details about the situation. While on the intuition part, someone who is using intuition as their main process, if they look at the same situation, their thought process is going to be something like, okay, what are those people doing here? Where are they going? What are they arguing about? How did situations come to this state? So it's a lot more abstract and interested in how things are going to progress and where things are going. And also the connections between things. So they will try to understand what's the connection between the people. Are they a couple? Are they not? And stuff like that. Okay, so this is on the perception side. And now we can look on the judgment side. So on the judgment side, we also have two options. So the next layer, we have one of the options is called thinking, which is annotated with T. And the other option is called feeling, which is annotated with F. So what can you say about thinking and feeling? So for the thinking, we know it's a judgment process, so it's used for decision making. But how it is used, what is the difference between the two? So you can think about the thinking as rational and logical, arriving at the conclusion of something. So it's based on logic, based on the rationale. And people who are using this kind of process are usually interested in systems. So they want to systematize whatever they're doing or whatever they're exploring and make it very impersonal. Also, those people can tend to think in true-false statements or smart, stupid kind of things. So what you can see, you can hear someone who is using the thinking process say something like, okay, this is true, this is not true, whatever you said is stupid, something like that. So this is a common statement that the person who uses thinking is going to use. And on the other hand, the feeling process, which is the other option, is, as you might expect, connected to emotions, connected to feeling. So the decision making is based on personal values, feeling, and group dynamics to some extent. So these people think differently than the not think, but actually make decisions differently than the thinking type, which is they use as a metric the dichotomies of, let's say, good, bad, or like, dislike. So people who are high in feeling, they're gonna be interested in what is good and what is bad, not what is true and what is false. And they're also some of the types are gonna be very aware of what they like and what they dislike, for example. And they might make decisions based on what makes them feel good. So this is about the feeling process. And what we discussed in previous videos when we used what we call natural processes is going to be this layer. So the natural processes we have are those four: sensing, intuition, thinking, and feeling. Okay, so now we can move to the final layer, which is this one at the bottom. And in order to go there, we need to introduce one more concept, which is the concept of so-called orientation. And the orientation has two options for orientation, and the options are introverted or extroverted. You know this term. I think most people agree that this term was actually coined by Carl Jung. So he discovered extroversion or introversion. I don't know if this is true, but at least it's clear that he had very good awareness of what those means. And now, what do we mean by introversion and extroversion? It's actually a very nuanced and complicated topic. So we probably will be doing another video to explain only that part. But for now, we can use the definition that Carl Jung used, which is that introversion is related to subjective understanding and extroversion is related to objective understanding. And what that means is that you can think about it that introverted process is retreating from the external, from the objective, from the everything that is outside of you and focusing on whatever is inside of you. So this is the subjective way. And for extroversion, it's obviously the opposite, where you remove yourself from the internal and you focus on the external. So you focus on the environment around yourself. And we can use this as the basis for introversion and extroversion. And by the way, this is why the process intuition is annotated with N instead of I, because when you introduce orientation now, what are the 8 options? So for each one of the natural process, we have 2 options. We have extroverted sensing and introverted sensing, and we have extroverted intuition and introverted intuition, and then we have extroverted thinking and introverted thinking, and extroverted feeling and introverted feeling. It's actually an I here. And as you can see, I is used to annotate introversion. This is why N is used for intuition instead of I. So this is the idea. And what we have here at the bottom is finally the 8 cognitive functions that Carl Jung describes. And we will go into detail into each of the functions in separate videos, but for now we can give some basic basic definitions for those functions so we understand what they are about, and then we'll go into more detail in later videos. But first, about extroversion and introversion. Aside from the subjective-objective dichotomy, we also can say another general thing about it. So usually, whatever process is extroverted, you can think about it as it is fast in the moment and broad, expanding. Well, for the introverted process, you can think about it as slow, long-term, and narrow. So these are kind of ways to describe those 2 processes, and they apply to each version of introverted or extroverted for the natural processes. Okay, now let's go quickly over all the 8 functions. So extroverted sensing, first of all, of course, it's a sensing process, so it's using your 5 senses to gather information or sequence information. In terms of extroverted sensing, it's about gathering information. So extroverted sensing people, they are extremely good at being in the moment and doing stuff really that's happening right now. They can pay a lot of attention into that. Also, they're dynamic and flexible, and they're able to be extremely good at managing crisis situations in the moment. So this is classic for extroverted sensing. But what they might have problem is with, for example, addiction, since they are so good at the current moment, and what can happen is that they have a peak experience by using some substance, and they need to recreate it constantly again and again, since they are just seeking the best experience possible in each moment. So this is why they can have trouble with addiction, and this is the main focus on the extroverted sensing. They're focused in the present moment. So introverted sensing is a lot different, although it's still a sensing process. People who use introverted sensing as their primary process, you can notice that they have extreme awareness of their own comfort level and condition. So they're very good at spotting differences between the past and the present. They have also very good visual memory. So a person like that might walk into a room and then see that you have moved the book like to a different place, and they immediately notice this because they have an idea in their mind what was before, and now they see that what is right now is different. So those people are extremely good at detailed work and being able to execute sequential tasks or sequential things one after the other again and again without fail. So very detail-oriented people. But again, as with every function, it also has a disadvantage. So for these specific people, what might be bringing them trouble is that they are not able to think about new ways of doing something, and they might be stuck in the past or stuck in a routine that doesn't help them. But aside from that, they actually really like being in a routine, and also they like history, so they like learning about things that happened in the past. This is bringing them happiness, and you can see people actually looking to have this kind of experiences, go and like look at architecture and experience something in this way. So this is standard for SI. Now, if we move to the next function, so we are looking now at the process of intuition, and for the extroverted intuition, as you know, extroverted, we talked before, is fast in the moment and broad. So how this applies to intuition is that people who use this process, they're extremely interested in exploring new things and also making connections between things. So they're extremely quick-witted, very quickly to make connections, and then also if you require some brainstorming, they'll be incredible. They're incredible for brainstorming because they're so quick to gather new ideas and think about different things. What they might have trouble with actually is, let's say a person like this is working in a standard corporate environment, but they're gonna feel very limited because this kind of environment will not allow them to be constantly experiencing new things or generating new ideas, because the environment requires staying focused for prolonged periods of time, which people who have extroverted intuition might have trouble with. And on the other hand, introverted intuition, again, is about making connections, but is in a different way. So as I said before, for extroverted intuition, you can think about it as expanding and broad. But since this intuition is introverted, it is slow, long-term, and narrow. So what this means in terms of intuition is that people using NI, they usually do a process of so-called synthesis, where instead of generating ideas, they hear what other people are saying, or they gather information. So they gather all of these ideas and they synchronize it and narrow it down to an essence. So they like this kind of thing where they have a holistic understanding of something. So they look at all perspectives on something, but they want to extract a specific essence of the thing and understand it in this way. Also, those people usually think in a very narrow, but at the same time long-term way. So they're going to be very narrative driven and very future focused, which they're going to have this vision. It might not always be like visually compelling, but they're going to look at something and see how is it going to be projected to long term. So this is another common thing you can see with NI users. So they're big picture thinkers, future focused. So what they might have trouble with is they might be too narrow-minded. So maybe they're not considering enough possibilities, or they find something that is good, but it turns out there's something better. So they might benefit from talking with a person with extrovert intuition to give them more possibilities. Yeah, so one problem will be that they're too narrow-minded, and another problem that they might have is that whatever they are looking at does not have connection with reality. So they can think about this big future ahead, but they're missing some detail that doesn't make it possible, and they just stay in their head and don't know anything about it. So this is a potential problem. Okay, and for the other four functions, now we're on the judgment axis. So these are judgment functions. And for the thinking, we have extroverted thinking and introverted thinking. So extroverted thinking, you can think about it as the power of execution. People who use TE, they're extremely good at executing tasks in sequence, and they usually are very goal-oriented and achievement-oriented, success-oriented, what they call success. And they feel energized and in their best self when they have a task and they are going to execute the task. So they're very accomplishment and status driven, but they also rely on outside sources and data for their information. So they prefer to get the most efficient way, which is usually whatever other people have already discovered, and they just reuse this method. So usually a lot of the CEOs and people who rise higher in corporate world actually use TE, since it's very good at this specific type of advancement, you can say. But what they might have trouble with is connecting themselves to their emotions or the emotions of other people. So this is a problem for them. And this appears if you communicate with them, they might steamroll you or like completely not care about your emotions. So this is about TE. TI is a bit different. So TI is focused on, since it is internal, you can think about it again. It's a bit slower and it's narrow. And also, but it's long term as well. So TI users, they're very logic and based, and the first principle of thinking, if you know what it is, so this is where you boil down everything to the smallest possible fundamental truth. This is a very TI idea. So people who use TI, they really like this kind of first principle thinking where they dissect everything and create smaller and smaller parts to explain the thing at the end. So they essentially try to arrive at the truth, the fundamental truth of something. Those kind of people are very good at problem solving. So they're very good at trying to debug a problem. Yeah, since they're very logic based, people with TI think a lot in true false statements. So this is true, this is not true, this is false. And you can notice that if someone is using TI as a higher process in their psychology, they usually can be very, they can try to correct you on your usage of words. So they'll be very focused on whatever words you're using. They're as precise as possible, so they're very focused on precision. Okay, and the last part is on the feeling axis, when again we have these two options of extroverted feeling and introverted feeling. So for extroverted feeling, you can think about it as a person who is trying to be to create good feelings for other people. This is why it's extroverted. This is a very accommodating person, usually very well socially integrated, having a lot of friends. I'm talking about a person who has this FE processes very high. Those kind of people want to allow everyone to be heard, and if you know about this utilitarian idea of sacrificing the individual for the greater good of the group, this is a very FE kind of idea, extroverted feeling kind of idea, where the group is very valuable to them and it's like the most important thing. And as you can imagine, if this is the kind of way you think, what can happen is that you might have trouble with being lost in the group and not having your own opinion. So people like that should be careful about this kind of problem. Also, another problem that can arise for FE people is that they might become so giving to other people that they don't have good boundaries and people make use of them. Especially some other narcissistic personalities may have trouble with FE users might have trouble with narcissistic types of people. And on the other hand, the last one is FI, which is, so FI is about personal values, and it's again feelings based, it's on the feeling axis, but since it's introverted, it's very idiosyncratic and also individualistic. So people like this, you can, if you look at someone on the street and you see he's wearing like 15 different pieces of clothing, all with different color, and he combines the color in a very interesting idiosyncratic way, it's a very, very high likelihood that this is an FI user. So FI users really value individualism and value personal freedom. And if you can think about the idea of liberal principles, so the value of the individual is above everything else, this is the kind of an FI idea. And those people usually use the dichotomy of like and dislike. So very often when you talk with them, you hear them say stuff like, I like this, I don't like this. So this indicates FI. And as on the other hand, as a pain point or as a disadvantage of having FI, you might think that what those people suffer with is that they reject the group too much at some point, and they don't value the group wisdom at all, and they require too much autonomy. So they might be having a very hard time integrating in a community, since community is all about the group. Okay, and I think that concludes this video. I covered everything I wanted to cover here. So thank you guys for watching, and see you again next time.